what's up everybody? Hope you're having a good day. I have another collaboration tutorial with my friend Alessandro Boncio, and he came up with this really fun technique. So here's what we're going to create. This is a Spiderman web slinging animation, and we're going to be using the new tools in S26 like the rope simulation. All right, so we're using a Mospline to generate this. So I'm just going to copy this and we'll go to a new scene. And I'm going to paste this in here. So this is the Mospline that we're going to be using. And let me just show you, if you haven't used the Mospline, you can just hit Shift-C and type in Mospline. And this is what it's going to look like by default. And what we're going to do is change it to turtle mode. And we're also going to change it to grow on separate segments. And under here, we're also going to change the display to line. One thing we did do was change the code to add a little bit more branching. So I'm just going to copy that and I'll put it on screen so you can copy it as well, but it's just adding a little bit more branching. All right, so if we go to the values, we're going to change a couple of these. The tropism, we're going to bring that down so it's more of a narrower growth. And then also the default angle, we're going to tighten that up as well. And what we're going to animate is the growth right here. So it goes from 0 and it grows on and then it branches out. And I think we stopped right around 6.18 or something around here. So it just ends with this little branch here. So this will be the base for our animation. And then what we did was we just went to frame 5 and we made a keyframe, went back to frame 0 and made it at 0. And then over the course of 5 keyframes, this Mospline is going to grow on, and that will be the web slinging. So the problem right here is that if we want to use the new simulation tags, the rope one that's in S26, we need to pin the ends, and we can't do that unless we have a point mode. And we can't do that with Mospline. We can't access the points. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this a spline, and then later on we're going to come back to the Mospline. So let's duplicate this by hitting Control and dragging. Let's turn off the Mospline original, and let's go to the other one and hit C to make it editable. If you're in point mode, you can see the points, then you can go to your live selection. And what I did was select all of the endpoints, and these are going to be the ones that stick. So select all the endpoints and then also select the source point right here. And I already did this, so I have a selection tag. You can easily create a selection tag by making your selection and then going to select and store selection, and that'll make this selection tag. But we basically just need this selection so that we can set the points here. Let's right click on the spline now and go to simulation tags and rope. And if we hit rope, the first thing we're going to do is change the bendiness to 3. We're going to change the stretchiness to 1, the radius to 1, and here's the important part is make sure that you fix your points with them selected. If we hit set and then we go back to our model mode, you can see that they have purple on the ends and this source spline right here. And that means that we are all set up so that these will stick at the end. Now we just need connectors to make this look a little bit more like a web. So let's right click on that spline. Let's go to simulation tags and let's go to connector, which is also part of this new system. All right, so under the connector, we're going to make sure that we turn on same object and let's update live so we can see what's going on here. And let's increase the search radius a bit. So we're finding connections here and we can increase the max connections, maybe to 20 or so. All right, so now it's going to connect between these and make it sort of a web animation. Let's change the stretchiness to 5 and the target length to 5, and let's hit play to see what it looks like. And we should have a nice web animation right here. All right, so one thing you'll notice is that it is bouncing up and down, and we would want to play around with the dynamic settings of that. And to do that, we can just hit Control-D to get to our project settings. Now, the previous dynamic settings are now called bullet, so everything like your dynamics tags, your rigid body colliders, all those are in part of the bullet system now. And the new simulation system is for the rope and the cloth dynamics. So this is the new tab that will control all the gravity and all the settings for that. So what we can do is play around with these settings to get a little bit less of this bouncing animation. We can maybe change the smoothing iterations to 1, and that will smooth it way down. And you can play with some of these different iterations or substeps to make things a little more accurate. But something like that should work pretty good. All right, so we have this spline set up, but we don't have it growing on like that Mospline did. It's just static and then it's on. There's nothing growing on. So we want to figure out how to get these tags onto the Mospline. And once we've set them all up, because all the points are the exact same spot as this Mospline, it's as easy as just grabbing these tags and dragging them while holding Control down to here to copy them. All right, now we can turn this Mospline on and we can turn that spline off. Make sure that you leave this checked on, but you can turn these two off. All right, so now the dynamics is starting at frame 0, but we actually want this Mospline to grow on to frame 5, and then we want the dynamics to take over. And we're going to do that in the settings again by hitting Control D. So if you go to simulation, we can go to the document frame range. Let's check that off, and let's make this start frame 6, because then frames 1 through 5 it'll be growing on, and then on frame 6 the dynamic simulation will take over. And now let's see what that looks like. So now you can see that it's growing on and then it's exploding. Now the reason it's exploding, it seems to be a bit of a bug. So I found that if you go to this tag here and you go to other objects, if you uncheck that while you're playing your simulation and then you check it back on, sometimes it'll fix itself. And if it doesn't, sometimes you'll have to go to the other tag and turn that one off as it's playing, and then turn it back on and see if that works. And now you can see that it works. So it's just a bit of a bug that you can kind of fix. All right, speaking of bugs, if you look at the end of these, you can see that there's some weird missing connections and things just are rotating strangely. And the reason is if you hit Control D, if you look at the elements that are being affected in this simulation, it only has R3. It doesn't have that last connector. And this connector right here, if we want to hit Control D and drag it in, for some reason it won't let me. So I did find a workaround. Instead of using the default attributes, we can actually add a different simulation object. So if you hit Shift and C, if you type in simulation, there is now a new simulation scene. And this is just going to give you a little bit more control over which elements in your scene are being used. So what we can do is just drag in these elements that we want to have this simulation. And now, because I added this scene, this last connector, for some reason, it now respects it. So then all we have to do is go into here and change that start frame back to 6. And I think we had smoothing iterations at 1. And besides that, I think everything else is the same. So we'll play this. And now you can see that on the end of these, they are actually connecting properly and it looks correct. So for some reason, the default scene settings don't work. But if you add a simulation scene and manually drag in all of your elements into here, all these tags, then it will work fine. That is the way to make a Spiderman web sling, taking that Mospline and having it grow on, and then having the rope simulation in S26 take over. I hope you all found that useful. Thanks for checking out the Pixel Lab. We'll talk to you next time. Ciao.